Hey everyone, welcome and thanks so much for joining us for today's joint presentation on trusted AI in financial services. So today we're going to deep dive into the joint solution that both the Monte Carlo and the SunnyData team deliver to our customers around specifically Monte Carlo Databricks and SunnyData as the kind of the three-pronged spear in order to allow organizations to deploy trusted AI solutions for financial services. A little bit of housekeeping at the top here. So I did want to acknowledge that obviously we're recording today's session. So for those of you who are here and then those of you who will have to tune in later, we're happy to record this session and we'll be sending it out tomorrow. In addition, Monte Carlo and the SunnyData team have actually entered a couple polls within this presentation in order to get a little bit of feedback and also get a better understanding of who we're primarily working with here. And then the other piece of quick housekeeping here is that there are questions, Q&A available. So at any point within the conversation, if you can post your questions in the QA or the chat, we'd actually love to answer those live. We'll certainly save some time here at the end for answering questions, but we'll also try to do it in line as well, as a lot of the content for today is highly topical, and we want to make sure that questions or comments from those who are able to join us can be addressed, and we can kind of use that as a means to continue the conversation in the right direction. So with that said, we'll dive into the presentation. Maybe before we get into the meat of things, I did want to acknowledge that there'll be a couple presenters. So myself, my name is Ethan Post. I'm here representing the Monte Carlo team. I'm a senior solutions engineer at Monte Carlo, who also operates as our field CTO and helping organizations identify and adopt a data and AI observability solution. For those of you who aren't familiar with Monte Carlo is the leader in the data and AI observability space. So the technology that powers a lot of the people in the process that help our customers build trusted, scalable data solutions that eventually feed into AI inputs and really, really reliable outputs. So with that said, John, I'd love to turn the table to you and let you introduce yourself and the SunnyData team.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. John Lucas here, solutions architect at SunnyData. Been in the data space for over a decade now, and particularly in the financial services industry. Just a little bit about SunnyData. We're a pure play consulting company that just helps implement solutions, particularly in the Databricks ecosystem, but just overall in general, just helping people achieve their goals within AI or just the data space in general.
Yeah, and the thing that I love about bringing these two organizations together to have this conversation is when we shift to AI readiness and the adoption of trusted AI products, it really is a matter of the alignment of people, process, and technology. So certainly you'll hear me reference that age-old paradigm here many times. But with that said, a lot of organizations are talking about and thinking about introducing data and AI products into either their internal user base or even external facing products. And this should come as no surprise to anyone who's taken the time to join us today. A lot of these initiatives are failing. In fact, this is a recent report that's gotten quite a bit of buzz, published by MIT. So a very academic perspective on AI adoption that is peer researched. 95% of Gen AI pilots at most companies are failing. And that is probably even more so in the financial services industry. And we'll talk about a number of reasons why that is. So, leading at the top with the big, bold problem statement, a lot of folks are talking about AI. Very few are doing this effectively. And the idea at Monte Carlo and SunnyData would be to help organizations do this better. With that said, I don't want to steal your thunder, John, but this 95% statistic is pretty interesting. And then I think you'll talk to us a little bit later about how the SunnyData team is flipping this on its head. Any teasers you can give for that conversation?
Yeah, I would say just keep that percentage in mind, because the way that you can impact your organization, either bringing in our team or the Monte Carlo team, you can pretty much flip flop that percentage to be a success rate instead of a failing rate. So we'll speak on that more later on whenever we get to the later portion of the presentation.
Yeah, very well said. And I think, again, anyone on the line is probably well informed enough to know that AI doesn't just happen, right? That this is not a natural process. This is something that folks have to adopt and really buy into over time. So moving from this very academic perspective into some of the research that the Monte Carlo team has actually put together and speaking with data leaders across organizations, primarily in the financial services space, there's a lot of momentum, right? Again, everyone is talking about this, and I think we've seen a lot of really interesting examples of folks kind of making good on this promise. But no surprise, 100% of the organizations that we have canvassed over the past year have a strategic priority to do AI, right? So this is not This is not something that, some developer is sitting in a closet thinking about or dreaming about. This is executive-led initiatives, or oftentimes groundswell initiatives from the user base to say, hey, I need a better way, a more efficient way, a more scalable way to do the thing that we need to do. And I think the combination of Databricks and AI and financial services is interesting because earlier this year, I had the good pleasure of being able to join the Databricks Data and AI Summit. And I sat in on a fireside chat between Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO and president of JP Morgan Chase Bank, and Ali Ghodsi, who is the CEO and co-founder of Databricks. Amazing conversation about the philosophy and the implementation of AI within financial services. And Jamie Dimon himself said, hey, all of our 300,000 employees on a daily basis have a remit to go use AI in some shape or function, right? So this 100% number should be no surprise, but this is the reality that the field is facing. The next statistic I'll throw out there really quickly is 91% are actually already doing this, right? Have already built or are planning on building an AI product. So this is no longer speculative. This is the thing that people in the field are doing. And John, I'd love to get your perspective on maybe one or two examples of the types of things that you and the SunnyData team have helped kind of put out there in terms of AI products.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the AI products that we just ended up implementing in a organization was utilizing chips and boards to just look and see where the manufacturing details are by training the model on images and image detection. So just that in general just speaks to the power of AI and being able to take away that human pointing at each individual picture and just utilizing the productivity of AI itself, as well as just using mortgage rates and just delivering out loans. You can utilize AI to say someone went through bankruptcy. You can to predict the probability of them defaulting again and whether or not you really do want to issue that loan, or if you do want to issue that loan, it'll be at a higher interest rate. So just those are two prime examples that we've done very recently to kind of use AI and just utilize it to its maximum capacity.
Yeah, what relevant examples? And anyone in the lending space, I'm sure, has heard or thought about the leverage of AI and large language models to do a lot of that heavy lifting. Now, here's the bad news. 68% don't think their data is AI ready. I call this the worst kept secret in the data space. Is you have executive pressure to do AI, and you have folks who are chomping at the bit in order to get their hands on models within the organization. The data teams typically are one of the only sets of folks who understand that none of this happens without good inputs in terms of data. And 68% of these teams are saying, hey, we need to go do this, but we actually don't even have the capability from an AI readiness perspective. So what does this mean, and how do you get from A to B to C? This is what I call the crawl, walk, run of AI readiness. So many organizations try to leapfrog or get themselves into a state where they can start building these things. But as anyone on this call probably knows, this is the type of thing and the type of muscle that you grow over time. So this 3-phase process in what I call the crawl, walk, run, really this is step number one is how do I use technology to support my ability to do widespread observability and an understanding if my data is even good, right? This is where we use AI on our data to observe what's happening and to potentially detect bad data. The walk is with a solution in place that helps us shine a light on the areas of our business or our data that need some help. Well, now we actually have the ability to provide AI ready data, and that we can have full confidence that we are delivering trusted data to eventually power those AI applications. So with a solution and a tool in place and an understanding that we are now data and AI ready, the third step, the run part, which is the fun part, becomes how do we then build and deploy AI applications? So a lot of our focus today is going to be on that eventual output of building and delivering and seeing ROI. But again, none of this happens without first crawling and then walking and then getting to run. And I would say that very few organizations can go from steps 1 to 2 to 3 without some help from potentially external partners in the technology that people in the process face. Now, let's talk a little bit about financial services specifically and the issues that are plaguing financial services organizations in 2025 that I think is dramatically different than historically some of the issues that many teams have faced. So if you look at these 4 points, again, I don't think that this is anything that folks on the line probably don't relate to. But on the left-hand side, what you're really seeing is breakdowns on the data side, right? And the right-hand side, those two points are really devoted more towards the build and the support of AI applications. Financial services organizations are either suffering or they are benefiting from a shift in data inputs, meaning many organizations have this massive deluge or this flood of inputs to their organization, whether this is buying data from external providers, whether this is the ability to now leverage hundreds of years worth of potentially paper documents that people can now start to make decisions on. So that shift in data inputs is really pointing towards the complexity in the ecosystem where the possibilities are limitless, but the more inputs we have, the more need we have to ensure that those inputs are trusted, they're valid, and they're reliable. The second piece here on complex pipelines, with that shift in inputs becomes a high degree of complexity, both in the heterogeneous nature of the actual applications and services we're using to power these platforms, but also just the general nature of how I deliver data in AI as a product and how I actually expect my customers to consume these things requires oftentimes a fair amount of complexity in the way that I go build. As we shift to the AI space, what we're talking about is evolving configurations. So this is the idea that, hey, the AI provider that I'm using maybe has introduced a new model and now I have to evaluate a new model, or we have existing or evolving configurations in the way that a model's been trained to produce a consistent output. And on the far right-hand side, this idea of a non-deterministic model is very troublesome for financial services, primarily because we are reliant on consistent outputs, and financial services, as everyone knows, is highly regulated, right? So my inability to have and produce consistent results can be seen as a risk to the business. So the idea is I need consistent inputs so I can always produce those consistent outputs. And what you find is the industry today is very fragmented, where what I really have is a high degree of siloed or fragmented nature of tooling. So some tools meant to do data quality, others to do pipeline observability, and then maybe some up and coming AI platforms that help me do things like observe a model or observe some outputs. But the reality is you can't do this without having a single solution or a single technology that can kind of span across that entire footprint. So I'll pause here. That's a lot of talking for me, but John, I'm curious to get your take or any one of these points that maybe stand out with you and the folks you've been working with recently.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the main thing is the data itself. That's something that I will harp on later on in my slides. But just having good data and extracting out the pieces that you're trying to put into a model to have that output and have that clean, trusted output is very key. And then the other thing too is you want to have what you want to do, and we'll speak on this later on. But what do you want to do with your solution, and have that in mind whenever you're going into pushing out those pilots or even putting something into production.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think this is a little bit anecdotal on my side, but when you think about this term I use, the AI arms race, in my opinion, the folks who are leading the charge, who are winning that battle, by and large, are the ones who are just doing it, right? So we talk about the process and the phased approach to how to get there. But once you get to that third state, that run state, the idea is, it opens a floodgate of opportunity and use cases. But to your point, none of this can happen without getting that foundation right. So many organizations that are sitting on the sidelines and waiting to see where the dust settles, those are going to be the ones that are struggling to keep up with the pace of innovation here. And what does this actually look like for the modern organization, right? We talk a lot about the complexity and the size and the scale and the difficulty, and really wrangling the general question of, is my output good? Is my product actually doing what it's supposed to? Here's what I'd call a pretty streamlined depiction of what this process may typically look like. So this visualization here is meant to represent the flow of data through a system that's producing and feeding into an AI model, which can produce obviously any number of results here. But at any point within this process, there are critical junctures wherein a breakage or an issue or a failure is going to have dramatic effects downstream that typically aren't going to be caught unless an end user is saying, hey, something looks weird. The stakes for AI delivery is much higher because typically there is no human, there's no person to sit on the other end of that pipeline saying, hey, this data looks weird, right? I'm making autonomous decisions based on agentic workflows. I'm doing things like suggesting or recommending things that consumers are leveraging. So again, this whole point is across this very brittle and complex pipeline, there's a number of ways in which data breaks. In reality, there's really 4 primary categories that you see breakages of data. So you see bad source data. This is an issue where maybe my external provider isn't sending data or sending the wrong file and something looks wrong. We can have bad systems. So maybe a job stopped running or something gets queued up and all of a sudden I see a mismatch in my data. Code changes. These are oftentimes seen as silent failures, where an engineer, whether it was an intended or unintended consequence, makes a change to a system and now the output looks different. but my inability to see that that thing happened and anticipate that failure is really, really detrimental to the output. And then finally, model observability. So yes, I can observe all the inputs here. I also need to observe the model itself and the output in order to say, hey, the system is working as expected. And when we talk about, I'd say the juxtaposition between legacy data reliability and data observability and AI observability, the reason why it's so critical to have a technology that can kind of span that gap is because when you think about data, you think about things like freshness, volume, schema, quality, any number of things that determine whether data is good or bad. On the AI side, there's an entirely separate set of problems. So things like output relevance, clarity, helpfulness, right? A number of things we can do to measure. But if you can harmoniously observe across this pipeline and this entire workflow, what it allows you to do is say, hey, the data is good, it's of high quality, I can measure that, and I can actually measure the signals that I'm getting in my output. So again, the modern approach to this process here is have a single solution that goes all the way from source to target that can tell me when and where things are looking differently than they should. And the final thing I'll really touch upon here is this idea of what does this mean for a given customer? So in the financial services space, there's a lot of expertise and shared customer base, both between the SunnyData and the Monte Carlo team. NASDAQ is an example that we talk through a lot, given that they are obviously a globally recognizable brand, but are using data in really creative and innovative ways. And what we're showing here is the NASDAQ team themselves obviously have a high level of regulatory scrutiny, and they were seeing some costly regulatory fines and other issues that were popping up with maybe some bad data hygiene or lack of observability. And with Monte Carlo and the implementation of a solution, they were able to reduce that by 90%, right? So they were able to decrease the amount of time that they spend fighting fires. And actually, they were able to evaluate and quantify this into a $2.7 million savings from the amount of time that they're no longer spending on having to throw a human at the problem. And when we talk about the combination of people, process, and technology, obviously Monte Carlo as a software vendor is a technology, but all this comes together through the inherent combination of good process and smart people in order to do these things. So that's why I'd actually love to tag you in, John, and we can kind of keep this presentation moving, but more in terms of how the SunnyData team is unlocking that people, process, and technology in a very harmonious way.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ethan. Thank you so much. So, like Ethan said, it also takes people as well as the technology itself to implement solutions and just make sure that your data is you're extracting your data and making it the most useful for your organization. In terms of that percentage that we mentioned earlier on, 15% of AI projects reach production right now. But whenever you bring in someone like a SunnyData or a Monte Carlo, for example, and bring in the different people, that percentage skyrockets to that 95% success rate whenever we reach implementation of products. So in terms of the strategic solution, you want to make sure that you have something in mind to target, whether that is some of the examples that I mentioned earlier, where you have that, hey, there's someone that went through bankruptcy, and we need to, take those different pieces and functions and put it through the model to see whether or not we want to give that person a loan, or whether or not they are even able to get a loan, or if we want to get that higher percentage rate. So just having that implementation solution in mind and that ROI that you are targeting is just one of those ways that you will find that AI will be the most helpful. Also, with systematic implementation, we take a 4-phase approach, which I will touch on more on the next slide. But that brings up your percentage rate of success from a 70% success rate to that 95% success rate. So you just want to make sure that you are constantly going through that loop of, hey, here is a good use case, and then we are testing it out in a POC fashion, then implementing it into production, and then constantly retraining and refocusing that model after it's been deployed within your architecture. The other thing is just technical foundation. You want to combine a platform like Databricks with the knowledge and the experience of a Monte Carlo, and then bring in a team like a SunnyData to help you implement that technical architecture, and just make sure that you're getting the most not only out of your data, but out of the products that you're investing in. because if you don't take all of those routes, then you could end up like the 95% failure rate that we mentioned earlier on. So what is that four-phase methodology that I was talking about? Obviously, you have to have that good business use case. You want to pinpoint and target that, and that's something that we help in different companies do and develop. We want to pin down, hey, this is the use case that we want to focus in on. This is the thing that will help our organization succeed the most when implementing AI, instead of just saying, hey, I want to use AI and just implementing it directly into your already architecture that you already have within your organization. You then define the scope. You got to make sure that you are staying within not only budget, but the restraints within your organization and what it can handle at the moment in which you are trying to do that use case. We then do a POC style phase where you will test it out, make sure that it works. We'll make sure that, hey, the scope is exactly what you need to do, and just make sure that the processes as well as the users that will be using the technology can utilize it to its fullest capacity. You then go to the project phase. Project phase is where you will implement that POC that you did, but to a larger scale. And that's when you start to get to that bigger success rate of, hey, okay, we have the business use case, we have proved it out within our organization. Our organization now has that backing, and we can see it has value, can be successful, and then push it into production and actually utilize it within your organization's architecture. And then obviously you have to do constant improvement. A model is only the best that whenever you feed it good, useful data. And by extracting that useful data, you're able to constantly improve that model and just use AI to its fullest capacity. And you're just able to get the most value out of the products that you are investing the most into. I'll pause right here, Ethan. Do you have any commentary on this four-phase approach and how everything just kind of flows together?
Yeah, I'd say I think it's very thoughtful and it's very well laid out. Primarily because oftentimes that phase number one, that business phase, which sometimes Monte Carlo will even refer to as step zero, is completely glossed over or missed. Right. So the idea that I have to predefine the success criteria and the conditions and the use case up front helps me go deliver a solution that I know is actually going to solve a problem versus just kicking the tires on new and innovative technology. So I think the inclusion of that process and also having some expertise in how to craft that business narrative is really critical. And I think this is where we see a lot of organizations falling down on, the use of interesting technology, but not in seek of an actual, impactful business outcome. I think maybe one question I have for you that I kind of realize as I'm looking through this slide, what
Yeah.
would you attribute that sharp rise in the probability of success to? Between these various phases, right? So like what is the primary driver of that amount of success you can expect based upon how far along in this process you've gone?
Yeah, so just like you said, that business use case does get looked over constantly whenever you are utilizing new shiny technology. Everybody sees the trends and they want a part of the trend because they don't want to be left behind, but they're not stopping and pausing to think, hey, where can I implement this into our current architecture and utilize it and get the most value out of what we're trying to do with whatever technology that we're trying to implement. You see that sharp rise from POC to production because once you have that core business use case, you then have a successful proof of concept or proof of technology where that the technology has been implemented and has been used on a smaller scale, then able to just push that out overall within your architecture. You just see that sharp rise up because not only do you have, hey, the backing of my organization now because we went through this POC process, but you also have already done somewhat of the learning phase through the POC process to where now you kind of know how to use the technology moving forward and get the most value out of it.
Yeah, well said. That's super thoughtful.
All right. So in terms of implementing all of this, you do have to have a nice governance structure within your technology and implementing it in. Getting that compliance, the ROI, the trust, and the performance is key whenever you're adopting AI within your organization. When it comes to compliance, just having those safeguards and the regulatory and ethical standards in place, that's key, especially within the financial services industry, but really in any industry. You Everybody's data, especially people's data, is very like safe and sacred to each individual person and each individual organization, and you want to make sure that you are within compliance with whatever you are trying to implement and whatever you are feeding your model. You also want to see that ROI. Obviously, you're investing a lot of money into the process, the technology, the people that you are helping run your organization, and just crafting out that business value is key to just seeing the overall return on investment within the technology that you are implementing in your architecture. Trust builds confidence, obviously, but it goes back to the previous slide where if you don't have the trust and the backing of your overall organization with AI, then you're not going to be successful overall. And you just want to make sure that the trust is there, not only for the team that's using and implementing the technology, but also the end users as well as the overall business itself. Seeing that trust and that trust factor within AI to make sure that you are following all those regulatory standards and there is no data leaks, there is no bias within your model. It's just key within having the AI governance and having AI adoption within your organization. And then finally, performance. This all ties together with long-term success. Performance is key just in terms of like speed to production, speed to getting the most out of your data and out of your organization's implementation of technology. And combining all of this together just is a key success rate for just overall success within the market and the organization. Now, in terms of AI governance and action, just establishing those compliance frameworks, you want to build the structures and have the transparency within your organization to manage the model risk, manage the track decision making, as well as the satisfying those regulatory requirements. Say you get audited, you want to be able to have a clear point of action and show that, hey, we are masking all of the sensitive information. We are keeping everything under wraps that can't be public. And we do have those necessary steps to make sure that our organization is keeping everything safe and behind closed doors it needs to be. And the people that also have access to certain pieces, it's also making sure that they are the only ones that have access within the data in your organization. You're also validating your ROI and aligning with your business outcomes. Every AI initiative should be measurable. You should be able to see the return on investment whenever you are using AI and you are implementing it within your organization. Tracking that ROI is very key, but also just making sure that the project is meeting its goals. It's creating value within your organization, and it's becoming something that is relevant to your organization's goals and aligning with everything that you're trying to do. And you want to make sure that it's not just a fun project that you're seeing cool results from, but it's also being valuable to your business. And then ensuring that the model meets regulatory standards. Accuracy is very, very key. You want to make sure that your model is being fair, unbiased, and compliant with all of the regulatory standards, and it's not just spitting out just random results. And you need to be able to trust it. And that goes back to number 2, where the ROI is they're kind of in tangent there, where if you are able to get more out of your model, then you are seeing more ROI when it comes to just meeting your organization's business outcomes, and then you're able to get better value out of and extract out of that model. I'll pause right here because we talked a lot about just the governance overall and the pieces and functions that you kind of have to be mindful of. Ethan, what are your thoughts on just governance as a whole within AI?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting in that data governance to me is a well-known function at this point that's been around for decades. The rise of AI governance, I think, is built on largely the same principles, but pointing in a different direction, right? So what this means is this is an entirely new function for most any organization on the planet. And I think what you've defined here, especially for those in financial services, are a lot of the key considerations on why either these, data governance and AI governance either live in harmony as a single unit or can entirely be separated out within an organization. But I think the expertise of the SunnyData organization and how you've helped other folks roll this out is so critical to seeing success. Otherwise, anyone who's trying to implement these types of principles is likely to fail before they succeed.
Yeah, and we've come into organizations that already had a framework in place, but was able to pinpoint and show them that, hey, like you're not doing as much as you could be to protect your data and protect your organization's just sensitive information. So
Yeah.
it's a very key piece to overall success. And then here's an example of kind of how a customer engagement would happen. You want to detect just early model drift in terms of the observability of the data quality that you're seeing within the model that you're implementing. That's key, just especially within the POC phase, because you're able to kind of test things out, see what's working, what's not, before you go straight into production. You never want to not have a use case in mind, test it out, and then just go straight in and then straight into production. You want to kind of have that little bit of a buffer phase where you're kind of tweaking and testing things out and just making sure that the model is accurate and reliable. This kind of like process of the four-phase approach, you're able to accelerate deployment times by 30%. It just streamlines the automation of everything and just the development process and makes it faster. And then de-risking AI adoption. This is embedding the governance like we talked about before, but then also monitoring those safeguards and aligning with the regulatory compliance and just making sure that you're confident with your AI outcomes. Combining all of this together, you're able to just have an overall successful deployment within your organization's just overall technology infrastructure.
Yeah, and I'll obviously rubber stamp that first point on early detection being the critical function to get to trusted adoption. Obviously, that is Monte Carlo's expertise and primary focus. But I think what you've outlined here is so important, and that is part of this, but also the acceleration and the value realization and the de-risking of that investment. I think, especially in financial services, very well said. But that first bullet point can I hit closer to home for myself and the other folks at Monte Carlo.
Absolutely, and that's why they're a close partner of SunnyData's, and that's why we work together to help implement solutions within not only financial services but just industries as a whole. Like it's very key, and again, yeah, driving that point home, 100%.
Yeah.
And then your overall outcome of implementing a solution, you just want to have that overall structure and a governance first approach whenever you are having AI projects in mind. You want a faster development, which leads to accelerated value capture. You're able to streamline those pipelines and just reduce the risk and the time to value by allowing your organization to realize the benefits and just see how useful AI can be within your organization. You also de-risk AI adoption with compliance at the core. You again build out those safeguards, ensure that you're being compliant, ethical, and just overall addressing everything from start to finish. I will harp over and over again that you need to have a proper use case in mind, that you are targeting to gain value out of the technologies you're trying to implement, and that you're just overall utilizing every feature and function that you can out of the technology that you're using within your architecture. And then it's trusted within leading financial institutions. This method and this methodology has a proven track record of being secure, compliant, and high performing. And this just overall just harps on being a successful four phrase approach of finding that value out of all of the technologies that you're trying to implement within your solution, particularly with the Databricks platform. And by bringing in a Monte Carlo as well as SunnyData and just bringing us all together as one team helps your organization just be the most successful that it can be. And it's one of those things where it's just key within the technology industry as a whole.
Yeah, and I think maybe to summarize the content that we've walked through in the past 30 to 40 minutes, I think you just kind of put a nice sharpened point on that, in that it's not that organizations today are able to leapfrog the required set of steps that they need to do in order to get to that finish line. I think you've laid out a very clear 4-step phase, and I think all the things we talked through in terms of the crawl, walk, run. So getting organizations to first shift that perspective and that way of thinking, and then always point towards value and ROI. But while we can't skip steps or we can't cut corners, I do think that there is something to be said for partnering with organizations that have seen success and have helped shepherd other folks through that success. Because what you're able to do then is accelerate your speed through those checkpoints and through those gates versus failing and failing and failing and then finally being able to figure it out. So again, I think the combination of the right technologies in place, the people in place, both within your organization and your partners, as well as the process that you put in place to define and govern these types of things, hypercritical, right? And the only way to figure that out is by having someone who's trusted and who's been there and done that. The last thing I might actually call out here, just to really hit folks over the head with what we talk about in terms of ROI, is an investment in the solutions we're talking about here has a dramatic payoff. And Forrester is a third-party analyst organization that has actually gone through and done an independent study of what the ROI of something like this could look like, right? There's a ton of numbers here. I'm not going to go through all the statistics. What I would say is, if anyone's interested in learning more about these or anything else on the overall total economic impact of Monte Carlo specifically, but also the thoughtful adoption of these types of things with a partner, there's a Forrester Total Economic Impact report that we'll share as a follow-up and kind of a leave behind. But look, 357% ROI on an investment in technology over a 3-year span is bar none, right? That's unparalleled for the amount of value that you get with an initial investment. And what we really talk about is the amount of reduction of the hours that you're spending on doing very manual, very firefighting style tasks, and being able to reorient yourself toward the value that AI solutions can bring, right? So what we're doing is decreasing the amount of time you spend on what should not be a manual task, giving you the ability to provide more value added activity. And then we focus on the outcomes, right? So it's not just time savings, it's also, well, what is that new strategy, or what does that new product actually unlock for you? Whether it's reduction in losses or reduction in costs, whether it's increase in efficiency, whether it's better regulatory compliance or more efficient regulatory standard keeping. So again, at the end of the day, the idea here is that this is not just an investment in the people and the process and technology. This is a hardened investment that has a very clear ROI. And if there's one takeaway here, it's that there's others that have done this and there's others that have been through this successfully. So if you're sitting on the other end of this line thinking, hey, we're a ways off, or yeah, this is ambitious, but I don't see our organization ever really getting there, I would challenge that, right? Given the expertise that both the Monte Carlo and the SunnyData teams bring to this scenario. So that said, I'd love to kind of open it up if there are any additional or further questions here. And again, I would love to extend some thanks to John and the SunnyData team for joining Monte Carlo here today on this webinar. So yeah, hopefully this was a thoughtful and helpful set of guides and steps that folks can kind of work through as they work towards that AI readiness and that adoption of AI products.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ethan.
Cool. Okay. Looking like no additional questions at this time. So maybe we'll wrap a few minutes early. And then, as I mentioned, we'll certainly send out a recording of this conversation if you want to review or share with other folks. And then, if there are any additional questions, my suggestion would be to respond in kind, and certainly we'll get you in front of the right folks to answer any of those questions that may come in the next day or so. Hey, thanks everyone for joining. Have a good day.